Welcome, my name is Victor. Today I set out on a journey to figure out if AI has its place in the world of education and music. But I will not be the one to do the talking.
I think there are a lot of people in today's society that have no understanding of what's going on.
Big corporations looking for ways to not pay workers.
My AI-generated email will go to a parent who'll send me their AI-generated email.
Okay, so then what do we do about that?
But before we jump right into action, before we proceed, let me introduce our guests for today's show. This is the part where I say,
meet the speakers.
My name is Ryan Drew. I'm a musician and someone who spends a great deal of time researching and practicing with AI tools.
My name's Ian Toms. I am a math teacher and a musician, and I also teach guitar here at UPEI.
I'm Dr. Andrew Zink, and I am the one responsible for teaching music and culture here at the music department of UPEI.
My name is Ross Malcolm Boyd. I'm a musician, composer, and music educator. I do have a degree in audio production.
it is now that we know who our suspects are. We must ask them a few crucial questions to continue the investigation. This will set stage for further questioning. It is important for you to know that these people know what they're talking about. So,
Do they use AI?
Yeah, all the time, absolutely. I use it both deliberately and in ways that I feel like I can't escape.
I'm sort of in the boat where this is happening and I have to get myself on board. I think in a lot of ways I've been using AI for a long time. So as a musician, like I've had backing track apps since I was in high school. Those had existed, since the mid-90s on my Win95 computer.
As a musician, as a composer, music producer, I find myself using music production tools that have AI embedded in them. I don't know if on a daily basis I'm thinking about it as AI. It's just another tool.
One of the podcast clients I work with, I do use ChatGPT to generate show notes. I had been doing the show notes by hand, so to speak, but in order to basically get all of the keywords for search engine optimization, the podcast host wanted to switch over to AI, basically to generate, episode summaries with all of those keywords, those things. So I've been using ChatGPT for a while now, yeah.
and I wonder, how did the experience of use of generative AI look like? Was it worth it?
It's very surprisingly easy. I can understand how, I understand the appeal, right? Like, I get the magic of it. You type in some prompts and you give it a bunch of information and it spits something back at you that is pretty solid. It needs some smoothing, but I was very impressed by how quickly it just gives you what you want.
AI is a substitute word for generative AI. As a teacher, it's been there. As a math teacher, I've encouraged students to use apps like PhotoMath, where they can take a picture of a problem and it will automatically generate the steps to help them better understand what's happening. So I use Wolfram Alpha for some math stuff, and that's been around for quite a while, sort of computational intelligence. And I use GPT for my kids when they want to debug code for their coding project. So I use it to make my life easier. If there's something that I need to generate that's just a jumping through a hoop, I wouldn't necessarily at this point use it for something that I wanted to actually present, because I kind of know my craft and my curriculum. I
tend not to rely on generative AI in my personal life. I don't have much need for it. I think that's really it. But I think my focus has really been on the teaching component of it, because that's been the big challenge.
Now, we will go back to educational application of AI and current concerns about academic integrity violations with the use of large language models. But first, Ian brought up a very important point. AI has been present in our lives for a very long time. In 1950s, Claude Shannon devised the first chess robot. While the computational powers of the time were not capable to run this robot, it was a proof of concept that AI can play chess. This was the first automation theory for chess. And little did you know, in 1996, world chess champion Garry Kasparov was beat by an AI machine named Deep Blue. Strategy games from the 90s like Warcraft 2, Starcraft 1, Command & Conquer, Red Alert, all of them utilized AI-operated opponents that fought back the player. In 1990s, a program named Band in the Box was released. This program generated backing tracks for musicians to practice to. So AI has been around for quite a while. The problem is now that the word AI became a substitute for the word generative AI, which is slightly different. And it is important to understand that difference. And of course, as any advancement in technology that brings a big, huge change, this one comes to the world with a bunch of problematic questions and controversies that I will try to shine some light on.
Yes, I have interacted with AI a lot. I think that's something that I forget, but I think a lot of people forget that we've been using AI integrated in our daily lives a lot.
Program that existed in the 90s called Band in the Box, and that has sort of morphed into this app called iReal Pro, where you put in the chords that you want it to play, you tell it the style, and then it makes up the bass, drums, guitar, and keyboard part for you. And you can tell it as many times round the form as you want, but you're providing it with the bare bones of sort of the harmonic content or the chord content, and then it creates it.
When I was a young lad, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, the big disruptor was the pocket calculator. Well, if you have a calculator, you don't have to open up your textbook to look at the log tables to calculate logarithms.
But back to education. There are a lot of concerns about implementation of AI, generative AI specifically, into the university setting at the moment. Educational institutions are not prepared to fight back the rain of fabricated essays from ChatGPT, nor are they sure if they should fight it back. Because theoretically, AI can be very helpful in assisting with learning.
I feel that there's a lot of fear and emotion that goes hand in hand with talking about academia and research. And you know, in the class that I teach with inquiry studies, there's a focus on like how do you own the process of using these tools when they perhaps may be threatening to senses of agency and control, when they perhaps threaten the ability to produce something that is evidence-based. The whole idea of data sets being exploitative as well. When we're talking about arts, it becomes a very sensitive matter.
In my work environment anyways, there's some expectation that you're presenting something that is your own ideas.
I think it's just like, again, how people are utilizing that. You know, if for instance, a professor is using it so they don't have to correct papers anymore, then you're going to miss like all of the nuance and like, you know, if you just want to grade it black and white, if the answer is yes or no and there's only one right answer, great. But like, you know, if there's nuance in it, then that becomes a problem.
You know, I always think if the education system survived the VCR, then it's fine. Campus used to have a lot of people who would write papers for money, right? That whole market is gone. Like, it's a myth that this was an airtight system and now it's a mess. It was a bit of a mess. Now it's a different kind and arguably bigger mess. So one of the things that we use a thing called Draftback, which is an extension on Chrome where you see the document get edited. And so the argument would be then, oh, well, then you can just have it written out for you and you type it in. But even at that, you know, real typing in looks like screwing up some things, copying, pasting, moving things around.
Now, as Ross pointed out, the context important whenever we talk about use of generative AI in educational systems like universities and schools. There are multiple sides to the story. Some of the uses are clear violations of academic integrity, and others seem promisable in how they can assist learning without hindering the learning. Obviously, using a large language model to write a paper for you is a violation of academic integrity. You cannot use ChatGPT to write a research paper for you. The creation of your work through ChatGPT, through a large language model, does not provide any authority or ownership over the product to the person who generated it. Yet, I'm not saying that there are no ways to utilize AI safely in educational systems, but we'll go back to that in a second. First, I need to point out that large language models do not possess all the knowledge in the world, nor they are consistently precise and accurate. Generative AI tools provide statistically most likely occurring results. They do not understand and answer the question. And generative AI learns from certain databases they have access to. And it's usually very, very difficult to track down the database to make sure that it actually makes sense, it's real, it's plausible. But I'm not the most technically educated in the matter of how generative models work. So if you're interested in a more deeper nitty-gritty technical details, go watch a video on the channel 3 Blue 1 Brown. But if you prefer a more simplistic explanation,
I frequently anthropomorphize AI. Sometimes when I talk about AI as a tool, the point is missed. I talk about it with my students as Uncle Ralph. Uncle Ralph is that relative that you have that thinks he knows everything. He doesn't, but he thinks he does. And if you ask him a question, he'll give you answers. And he'll go on and on and on, and then he'll start circling around and repeating himself. And if he doesn't know the answer, he's going to make something up anyway just to impress you, just to show you how much he knows. Yeah, if you don't know something, sure, go ask Uncle Ralph, and he might give you some great ideas. But don't trust him implicitly. He's not the expert. He's just someone who is a sounding board. He can give you ideas. He might actually know some stuff. But you're going to have to go and double check all that stuff anyway.
If people are committed to developing AI literacy and understanding the processes, like developing a systems thinking approach to how these tools work, 100% I think that generative AI can be leveraged to produce evidence-based research. Right. Do I think that that happens without developing AI literacy and without practice? No.
I see universities across this country and in the States, my university included, publishing documents explaining how to cite AI as a source. You can't cite Uncle Ralph, because when you go back to ask Uncle Ralph the second time, he's going to tell you something else. He's not an author. He's just a tool. You can't cite a tool.
AI can generate things in ways that we couldn't imagine. It can also be stupid in ways that we couldn't possibly imagine. Like it can screw up the question, how many R's are in strawberry? Yeah, there's a big concern that nobody's going to learn anything ever again. That was an argument against the printing press. That was an argument against learning to read. That was an argument against the internet, against VCR. I definitely have that concern that my students maybe at some point they're just gonna pass in something that was made for them. Again, I encourage people to use it for the learning part of it.
now that you understand the problematic of consistency in quality of generated AI works, it is time to talk about potential valuable and plausible use cases, such as, can generative AI be used for feedback?
Well, that's exactly what you want. I always tell my students, I will never upload any of your work to AI. That's a violation of privacy. So if you want to do it, here's what I suggest you do. Upload it. Here's some sample prompts, some strategies you can use to get the feedback you need. Here's the rubric for the assignment. Upload the rubric with your work and ask it the following kinds of things. That's where the power is. Getting the feedback, learning how to get the feedback.
Yeah, I think it is valuable. Absolutely. The idea that some sort of application can sort of coach you on improving stuff, especially when one does a little reflection on like, what did I input and what is it suggesting that I output? I kind of think that that's a great use of AI is for some feedback. And then being judicious about, well, what do you accept? What do you not accept? I think there has to be room for this, A, because it's here, and B, because when you look back at some of the pushback at earlier technology, it never looks good in retrospect.
Another point about feedback before we proceed, it is very important to understand that currently there are no official statements from most of the universities on how legal it is to use AI for assistance in your process. Some people may argue that it violates academic integrity, some may argue that it may be very useful, helpful, and should not be violating academic integrity, but the best thing you can do if you're in this position is to talk to someone who's going to be assessing your work and make sure that your process is crystal clear, that they know that you're utilizing ChatGPT for feedback, and you know they're okay with it. On the other hand, there are writing assistant tools as Grammarly. Recently, Grammarly updated to a new version. Now they utilize large language models. And what I mean by that now, not only does Grammarly correct your mistakes, typos, grammar errors, it also suggests better phrased, hypothetically more official, more concise, more formal sentences. Is this acceptable? Is this an accessibility tool? Does this break ownership of the project?
I don't see a problem with that. I mean, if you have a problem with Grammarly, then you probably have a problem with a thesaurus, right? Or like Style Guide. It's taking out an extra step in that process.
I've always told people to use Grammarly, so I mean, I'd be a hypocrite to say don't use Grammarly at this point.
I use Grammarly all the time.
Of course, it's a little more complicated than that.
But as I tell my students, I regularly have arguments with Grammarly. Once it starts making its suggestions, I often find that its suggestions change the meaning. And so I'm constantly battling with Grammarly. Would I give it up? At this point, I don't think so. But I tell my story to my students so they understand that, yeah, we have a relationship with our tools. We have to remain in control.
You know, it's giving you an option that you can take or leave. It's being based off of something that you created. I suppose there could be ethical problems with that. Like the deeper you get, you know, it could be a peer that comes over and says, hey, maybe if you word it like this, it'll come across a little bit better.
It's that whole like hierarchy of like, who's in charge here? Is it the Grammarly telling me what to do? Is this sentence that it says will be better actually what I'm trying to say? Is it me? Or do I have the ability to look at that, read it, and be like, no, that's not what I'm trying to say. And even if it is saying what I wanted to say, it's not my voice. I don't communicate that way.
And this brings up a curious idea. Maybe it's not the ideal sentence structures that matter most, but the personal flavoring you add to them, your personal voice, the little imperfections that make you human. Maybe that's what's actually valuable in a written work, especially if we talk about retaining ownership of that work, making sure that you have authority over your own work, and that you know that this is exactly what you were trying to say. And humanity loves imperfections. And a great example of that would be musical producers who always try to make their music slightly more human, even if it's completely digitally produced. The imperfections make us human. In a way.
What do you provide that AI doesn't already provide? Right. Because that's going to be a recurring theme everywhere. Your personal voice, your personal perspective, your ability to manipulate language and construct a persuasive argument. By all means, use AI. But if you use AI by itself, you're only going to get this far. You want to get up here, so here's how we get up to here.
Now that we're done with Grammarly, another valuable point to bring up would be summarizing articles, texts, emails, utilizing large language models like ChatGPT. Is that something usable in a university setting? Or does summarizing articles lead to degrees of retained knowledge?
The short answer I'd want to give is yes. Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why people say handwrite your notes versus type your notes. But that doesn't mean your goal is always retaining, right? Sometimes it's sorting. Sometimes you're going through 200 papers and trying to figure out which 20 you want to focus on.
I don't know. I mean, when I summarize stuff myself, it definitely improves things for me. I don't know if that's the process of summarizing it, though, or the product of it being summarized. I think often we're overwhelmed by text, and summarizing stuff is probably an efficient way to try and get at the key points. The problem might be is that some arguments require the long form, Sometimes the context is really important for establishing the strength of an argument or what's important. I teach students who, at the end of 2 years, they write 2 exams that are worth 80% of their mark for that whole course. Knowing every page from a 600-page book is not useful to them at that point. Knowing a 1-page version of all the concepts, that's useful. I've seen students do it themselves, though, and that has been amazing, but probably a whole lot more labor-intensive. And then on the other hand, this is a huge tool for equity for students who have different language abilities, who have issues with dyslexia, dysgraphia.
There is a very real risk of lessening learning and retention by short-circuiting the process of coming up with a summary by oneself. It could give you a 100-word abstract, maybe, and then you decide whether or not you're going to read it. As I frequently say to my students, academic writing is not a murder mystery. You don't have to go from the first word consecutively to the end. Read the abstract, read the conclusion, read the headings, jump around, find the things that are important. You have a question you're trying to ask, or maybe you have 3 or 4 burning questions. So do you need to read these 10 pages that have nothing to do with your project? No, you don't.
Are people just like reading the summaries instead of reading an entire article? Yeah. I mean, just from what I've done, like, I take, the transcript of an interview and plug it in for summaries. And it's like, I spent time with the with the podcast, editing it and listening to it and stuff like that. So like, I know the context and I can look at the summary and say, well, that's not exactly what they were saying, or that wasn't really the point that was there. Yeah, that is a problem because, you could be missing the point. You could be missing nuance.
As you've heard, the opinions differ quite a bit, but there's one important takeaway from it. Context of generative AI utilization means a lot. Summarizing information can be extremely helpful in day-to-day life. It even has its place in academia setting, helping to sort through tons of information to find that specific something that one would want to investigate deeper after the summary. The problem starts to arise when that investigate deeper after the summary never happens. As Ryan says,
The idea of automating usually comes with some degree of skill loss.
but another important potential use for AI is accessibility. AI can provide a lot of assistance and help to people with learning disabilities, such as ADHD, dyslexia, dysgraphia, etc. Summarizing, paraphrasing, checking for errors, all those things may be incredibly useful to people who struggle to put their words on paper or deliver the thoughts in a concise manner to other people.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's the kind of things that we want technology to be able to do, right? We want technology to be able to help us. We want technology to be able to realize the things that we're trying to do or create, and especially where society doesn't always seem terribly interested in making opportunities for people with different abilities. If tech can do that in the meantime, then that's great.
So I have a YouTube channel for math help videos that I've had since 2010. That's been a good accessibility tool. It's not AI generated, but there's AI stuff that's built in. So it auto creates my closed captioning. And that has been incredible to watch how good it's gotten over the last little while. For a lot of my English as an additional language students is that they can auto translate those subtitles into whatever language is best for them. And I'm told it does varying degrees of goodness for varying language. So that's been a really good tool for accessibility.
It is clear that there are definitely valuable and reasonable and plausible applications of a generative AI in education. And some professors are even encouraging their students to utilize those generative AI tools to assist their learning. The nuance is how. And I hope now you have a better idea of how. But enough of education. Another big problem and source of controversy and discussions and disputes whenever we talk about generative AI is the fact that it can generate music, it can generate photos, art, videos. The development of that side of technology leads to a whole new realm of problems of social ethics, morality ethics, and some physical, real-life concerns. But we will focus on music here, and we will start with employment of musicians.
generative AI as a form of technology and machine learning has already had a significant effect on labor and the job market, and it will continue to do that. The question of, do I fear some sort of like loss of employment? Personally, no. But I'm also recognizing that that is a trend that is happening, is a disruption to the labor market.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. But that's been a downward spiral for quite a while. You know, a lot of the tracks have synthesized or MIDI generated parts, if not the whole thing. Yeah, there'll be less probably studio musician work. There are definitely some genres though where I can't see it not being valued to have people playing the parts.
We're going through a very disruptive period for musical and, well, any kind of artistic creative. And as much as many people did not enjoy the writers' strike and the actors' strike down in the States, I think anybody who's involved with creative arts and the creative industries need to understand and support the fight to maintain autonomy and control over their own artistic industries. Interesting enough, you ask your typical professional film composer about their compositional process and getting contracts, and they'll say, yeah, you need both. You need to do your live recording of this small orchestra. No, you're not going to have a 100-piece orchestra. There's no budget for that. Right. But you'll have a small orchestra. And then what you need to be able to do is flesh that out in your mix with your plugins, with your sample libraries.
No, I don't think it's going to die. I think it's going to follow a similar path that like almost every industry goes through, that we've gone through many times in the music industry, film industry, so forth. And it's going to be basically fighting for workers' rights. Exploitive practices have been around long before AI, but similar things. I was thinking about animation in film. You have traditional animation, and then it switched over to computer-generated animation for a while, and the presumption, at least among the public, was that, well, it's cheaper to make it on computers, and it's not cheaper to make it on computers. They just didn't have contracts. The workers who were making computer animation were still spending just as much time, or a comparable amount of time, making all that stuff, but they didn't have the worker protections that the traditional animators had. So it was cheaper for studios to pay people as little as possible to do this new form of animation, and basically, so they didn't have to pay people. Like, that's what it all boils down to. Right. That's the danger.
Another concern is intellectual property. Can AI work be copyrighted? Who owns the generated work? Is that the AI itself? Is that the human who prompted it? Is that openai.com? On top of that, AI learns on massive databases of available information, and we don't have the information on what that database looks like. But chances are it does learn on anything that's available at the moment, so it learns on other people making music. So in other words, it would not be far from truth to say that AI steals to some degree.
Knowing whether or not your work is being exploited becomes a whole other sort of thing. And I think that just being in public domain, we can assume that there are generative AI models that are certainly learning from things that are public at this point.
Well, I think it's fundamentally incapable of doing any of this in a way that ensures that things like copyright, intellectual property, bias issues are avoided. And you can make the argument that that's what people do too, and that they take their various influences and they put them in a pot, and there you go. I mean, in a way, we're all ripping off each other anyways. If a generative AI provides most of the ideas for a tune that becomes a hit, does the copyright now belong to openai.com?
Like, what are the impacts of this practice on other people? And are these practices directly infringing on another artist's potentially intellectual property? Are they harming that person's ability to make an income, for example?
Oh, we don't need to hire people. But the thing is, like, even all the models that we have for generating music, AI had to learn that from somewhere, right? If you gave raw files to 10 different producers, they're going to come out with 10 different versions of that song, right? 10 different unique things that are going to have their fingerprint on it. If you're running it through AI, you basically only have whatever fingerprints are put in there. You're not going to get anything new out of it. You're only going to get like a summation of what already was. So it's essentially like taking music and using that to predict, its suggestions, right? So they are taking the work of lots and lots of artists, everything that they have access to create these results. I think AI generated work should just instantly be public domain. It belongs to everybody, because it was created by everybody, essentially, right?
But wait, humans inherit, learn, copy things from each other all the time. What's the difference when the generative AI does it?
Yeah, it's similar, but it takes away the autonomy, or not autonomy isn't the right word that I'm looking for, but it takes away the personhood of the people that came before, right? If I'm gonna learn a blues song, and I have some form of the blues coming out of me out of a speaker, like it's part of musicianship to kind of like trace the line back, right? To go back to like Robert Johnson, or to go to roots music in Africa and stuff like that, right? Like that's the process. And if we are only relying on a machine learning to teach us that stuff, we no longer have all that historical context and the personhood of all of those people who generated those things. So yes, it's the same, but societally we are sharing knowledge in a different way, right? AI isn't going to spit us, well, I mean, I suppose we could ask it to spit us out specific examples and specific people, specific cultures where this music derived from. But as of right now, the way it's being used, we're not getting that.
Now, I don't want to be a mood breaker, but there are worse problems. Wide availability of generative AI tools leads towards potentially very dangerous exploited practices of copyright laws by people. In other words, people could and probably will try to abuse the system to make a quick buck on someone else's expense.
We are in a dangerous and risky moment that is being shaped by some questionable business practices and greed. Recently, I watched a video by a YouTube content creator. He's a musician, and he took a piece of his music and he uploaded it to an AI music production site. He said, create a piece of music that sounds like this. Then he created another account, uploaded that AI piece of music to Content ID, created another YouTube account, and that account made a copyright claim against him when he created his next video because his music sounded too much like this other music that some other creator had. It was him! And it doesn't take much money to set up a wonderful scam to collect royalties from other people. Musicians have the right to be afraid of losing control of their own copyrighted material.
But is there a bright side to this matter? Or is it all black and white? And is AI particularly bad and wrong for using music production? Not really. There are definitely some applications and use cases where it could be fine.
I would say it has its place in a creative process. I think of like art projects that I've done where like I'll grab a book off the shelf and open up to a random page and read a line, right? And let that be the inspiration for something that I create, right? Like it's not that different than putting a prompt into a computer that bounces back some information at me that I can then use to extrapolate. I can see it as a tool, like, if you're kind of in a rut, if you're stuck, or for budding songwriters, right? To be able to use that as inspiration.
I've seen some pretty cool AI infused musical performances too, with like electronic accompaniments. I've seen real-time like lighting that is like collaborations with generative models and things like that.
And if you think about it, the idea of AI taking away labor-intensive work from people that people actually don't want to do is not new. And sometimes it can work out. Sometimes we don't need to be experts in some areas. Sometimes good enough is good enough. There are many tasks that don't require perfection. There are many tasks that we humans don't want to do and don't need to do to our best. There are tasks that require simply completion, not mastery. And of course, it's different in business setting, in educational setting. There are ethical concerns, there are moral concerns, there are concerns of retaining knowledge. However, in our personal lives, there are plenty of things that just need to be good enough.
That's the dream of AI, that it does the terrible stuff, the boring stuff.
Computers would take over factories and let us make art. Like, that would be great.
I'm really passionate about teaching mathematics, about playing guitar, about teaching music, but in my life there's stuff that I can't do everything at my best, right? There's good enough has to be good enough. It's like the joke, what do they call the med student who graduates bottom of their class? Doctor. The stuff that's just got to be good enough. Sure, yeah, give me the summary. I'll, get enough to look okay or to feel my way around. I probably won't be an expert. If I really want to be an expert on something, I'd probably be into that book enough to read all 700 pages. But
now, one last point before we finish this video that I need to bring up is ecological effects. Servers maintaining generative AI models and training generative AI models consume a lot of power. And as we know already, power doesn't come from nowhere, right? We need to produce electricity somehow, and so far humanity was pretty bad, shall we say so, at keeping power production ecological. And generative AI rapidly increases in power consumption for training purposes and use every day because there are more and more people who try to utilize it. There are more and more money that's being fueled to the machine. So unless they quickly figure out a way how to limit power consumption on such a demanding task, we might end up in a very peculiar ecological conundrum of, do we want to use these powerful tools or should we care about our planet a little more? And I would say that humanity, over its stay here on Earth, created and utilized enough coal power plants, and I'm not sure if we need to ruin our ecology even more.
The ecological impact is gross. Video generating programs have a much larger footprint than text-based stuff. But it's all very, very big. It takes a lot of power, really, really big carbon footprint. Obviously, even if we are talking about ethical utilization of AI, is it ethical if it's contributing to
a coal power plant?
Yeah.
Yep. That's it. I'll wrap it up. So, is it okay to use AI in educational systems? Is it okay to use AI in music production? Is it okay to use AI? Maybe. It's definitely not black and white. There is no direct answer to that question. All you can do is absorb as much information about the matter as possible and make your own conclusion out of it. Hopefully, this video, this set of interviews provided you with some ideas of how to approach utilization of generative AI in your life. But the choice is yours to make. All right, I'm done. See ya.